boys and girls, Squee913 here, and my microphone's falling down. What the heck? I've been wearing this for like 5 minutes, walking to my car in like wind and rain, and it didn't fall out of my ear once. And the second I start recording, oh, Murphy's Law. How dare you? Anyway, welcome to another segment of Thoughts Behind the Wheel as I drive home from school. And no, it's not raining that badly, so don't worry. It's not like I'm gonna crash on the road or anything. It's mostly just windy. And it was raining really bad like an hour ago. In any case, thoughts on what to talk about today. I did have Newkman actually asked me to. He wanted to know about my speech impediment and how that, like how I got past that, etc., etc. And I might do that at a later day. I'm not going to do it today. I have to kind of think about it exactly because the simple truth is there wasn't a whole lot to it. I'll go ahead and go into it. I had a speech impediment, and a lot of you know, and it wasn't a severe one, I'd say, maybe moderate, but it wasn't like I stuttered a lot or anything of that nature. It was very much just, I didn't pronounce things correctly. The classic, Roger Rabbit was Wodger Wabbit. And if you watch my Let's Plays, you'll still hear me do it from time to time. I'll be like, wow, that was very dangerous instead of very dangerous or something like that. And I used to be really bad with that. The way I got better, and please note that I am not a speech therapist, and if you really do have a serious speech impediment and you really do want to get better at it, I really would suggest seeking help from a speech therapist, because my technique won't work for everyone. But basically, I got into theater in high school. I got into drama, and my drama teacher helped me a lot with exercises that weren't designed to fix speech impediments, but were designed to warm up and strengthen your muscles, your vocal muscles as a whole. Because when you're doing a stage performance, you have to be very loud and very clear and very whatever. And what I did was use a mixture of riddles with tongue twisters and mouth exercises, and I did them every single day on a daily basis, and eventually, slowly, I started getting much better. You have to understand this is over a course of a couple of years that I got better, and I got over it, for the most part. But basically, tongue twisters you can find everywhere. There's lots of tongue twisters you can do. All I want is a proper cup of coffee made in a proper copper coffee pot. You may believe it or not, but I want a proper cup of coffee in a proper copper coffee pot. Tin coffee pots or iron coffee pots, they're no use to me. So if I can't have a proper cup of coffee in a proper copper coffee pot, I'll have a cup of tea. Or my personal favorite, I'm not the pheasant plucker, I'm the pheasant plucker's son, and I'll be plucking pheasants till the pheasant plucker comes. Hi, I'm the pheasant plucker. I'm the most pleasant mother pheasant plucker that ever plucked a mother pheasant. But you can find those all everywhere, and in doing those every single day with a strong emphasis on doing them correctly will help you. Another thing that really helped me was marbles or pencils. I would stick marbles in my mouth, and I would try to talk as clearly and as clearly and audible as possible. You know what I'm saying. And it would be hard, and your mouth would get tired and sore. Another thing you can do is put a pencil in your mouth, on top of your tongue, and try and talk, because it makes it harder for the tongue to form the sounds you need to form, and your lips to form the shapes they need to form, and it forces them to over-exaggerate. It basically trains your mouth to say things properly because it has to work harder to do so. And by doing these techniques, I, in time, eventually got over it. Like I said, it wouldn't work for everyone, and I have no idea how well it would work for people who have a stutter or something of that sort. But for someone who suffers from the same kind of speech impediment, these can help you. So, now that I've covered that, On to what's next. I don't know. I guess I could get into this. I've been thinking a lot on. I'm writing the next chapter or episode of my story, and so I've been thinking about that nonstop today. For those of you who don't know, I'm writing it's not really a fan fiction because it's my own story, my own universe, and all that stuff. So I don't know what you would call it other than just a story. But when I was playing Kingdom Hearts Let's Play, I mentioned it, and people really wanted to hear it or read it, and so I started writing it. And I've gotten really, really, really good feedback from you guys. And of course, I have to kind of take everything with a grain of salt that you're all my friends and you all want to tell me I'm doing a good job, and try and figure out who's really being honest and who's just wanting me to feel good and all that stuff. But overall, I've been getting really, really good feedback from you guys. And that makes my heart warm. But basically, it's an anime the way I have always wanted an anime to be. I'm a huge anime fan, especially of shonen anime, which are the genre like Naruto, Bleach, Dragon Ball Z, which are very, very action-intensive anime. And the basic premise of a shonen anime is you have a character. The character starts off weak. The character gets some special ability. And then he trains and he gets stronger, and then he'll come up against an opponent, and the opponent will be really strong, and he'll have to train and get stronger to defeat the opponent, and then he does, and a huge emphasis is put onto the action and the fights, and a good shonen anime is very, very good at unique, interesting, and yeah, so anyway, I'm sorry, I had a call. So where was I? Yes. So, but there are always problems with almost all the animes I've seen. Like, for example, the main character has enormous amounts of power. They just don't know how to use them. And that's like the common go-to theme of the main character having this well of undescribable power that he taps into whenever he gets angry or something. And while I like that, it's overused. And I thought, what about if you had a main character who had very, very little power and just learned to use it extremely well? Wouldn't that be cool? Other things too, like many anime leave their supporting characters behind. In other words, there's a couple main characters who get stronger and stronger and stronger, and then a whole bunch of side characters who were strong at one time and then just forgotten about. I hate that. And so, I was like, if I made an anime, I would make sure that all the main supporting characters were always important. They would never be irrelevant to the story. So, anyway, the point was I created my own story. So a lot of people enjoy reading it. You can go to the forums. It's there. It's called Arena. It's got its own section for that, and for a section for anyone who writes their own stories or fan fiction or whatnot, to post them up there and have other people read them and that kind of thing. Because I'm very, very into encouraging people to do things they love like that. But I was going to give you guys some tips, at least from what I've found for writing stories. And I'm no authority figure. I've written, 20 pages of a story and people kind of like it. So take that from where it's coming from. But these are my philosophies for making a good story. And I should point out this does not count for Let's Plays, especially not the Oblivion Let's Play, because that's a whole different animal, where technically I made a story, but not really. But I will kind of talk about that to an extent. But here's my philosophy on making a story. First and foremost, before you sit down to start the story, I really think that you should have the majority of the story written out. And I don't just mean for that, let's say you're writing books. I don't just mean for that book. I mean the entire saga. You don't have to have all the details or anything like that, but you should have the major events of the saga played out in your head already. Like, for example, the story I'm writing in Arena, I have everything. The only thing I don't have solid in my head is the exact climax. I know every story arc, anime goes in story arcs, meaning one story, a problem, and a resolution, and then you'll face a new enemy or whatnot in the next arc. And my story contains 5 or 6 arcs, depending on one that I would I mean, I might separate into 2 arcs, but I really feel as one. But it has 5 or 6 arcs. If it was a real anime, in my mind right now, it would run to maybe 100, 130 episodes, something like that, for the entire story, and then it'll be done. It's not going to be like one of those that goes on forever and ever and ever, because I feel that a story is much better when it has a beginning, a middle, and an end before you even start to write it. Why? Because you avoid inconsistencies. A perfect example is TV shows. Compare something like, who knows, any TV show. Let's take something closer. Take Star Trek Deep Space Nine, who did not have the main story when they started. They just had a premise and they went with it. And every season they write the seasons as they went along. Compare that to, say, Babylon 5, for any of you who have watched Babylon 5, which is one of the only TV shows of its kind where I'm going to say 4 seasons, because there was a 5th season, but that was an unexpected thing and wasn't involved in the main story. All 4 seasons of the show were written before the show even aired its first episode. It was already done. And if you watch those 2 shows, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Deep Space Nine had this very unconnected feel, and it would have, problems with there. Things that would happen in season 1 and something would happen in season 3 and it didn't really make sense, or they had to retcon something or whatnot. Babylon 5 is, I've said this before, one of my favorite TV series, because it's so ingenious and well connected, and events that take place in season 1 have lasting effects that you don't even realize the full extent until several seasons later, and the story is just so much better put together because you know the entire story. If you know the entire story when you sit down to write episode 1 of whatever your story is, you can put things in there, motivations for characters. You can start putting the seeds for betrayal or strength or whatever that the reader won't understand, but you will, and you'll know that in time this will turn into something really, really cool. As opposed to just having a basic idea and kind of knowing where you want to go, but not really, and then, halfway through the story, wouldn't this be really cool, but I can't do that because of things I've already written. You avoid that entire conflict if you know exactly where you're going. You don't have to have the details planned out. You don't have to have every line of dialogue and every fight and everything planned out in your head. I sure don't. But I have the main arc of the entire story already put together. And trust me, that makes writing so much easier, because you know, okay, this is not only what my character's motivation is now, but this is what it's going to turn into, and how do I get from point A to point B. Another tip I have, or a philosophy I have for writing, is, and so for anyone who reads Arena, as I slowly pump out episode after episode, keep that in mind. Keep in mind the fact that I have the entire story planned out, so that if something happens that looks like it may have future consequences or whatnot, understand that it really might. And even if you don't see it now or this episode or next episode, you might see it a long way down the road. I think it adds a new aspect to it. Another thing I was going to say was, losing my complete train of thought here. Oh yes, characters write your story for you. I believe any good story has really good characters, and to write a story is kind of like trying to role play from many different points of view at once. In other words, the first thing you should do, I think, is develop the world. You should have especially if it's a fantasy or science fiction story, you should have a very well put together world. Create a world that's unique, that's interesting. Create a backstory for the world, a history, so to speak. Different nations, what those nations went through to become those nations. That way, they have their motivations, and the people who live in that nation feel this way for that reason, and the cultural backgrounds. And you may not have to explain all this in the story itself, though eventually, sooner or later, you probably will end up doing it. It doesn't have to be in the written story, but it has to exist. That way you know what motivations people have. And then once you create the world, create the characters, and go with the same process. Give that character a history. Give that character a personality, a motivation, a thoughts, a way of doing things, goals. And if you do your job correctly, and you make characters that way, and you start that way, they will help write your story for you. If you have a group of characters who all have goals, ambitions, and personality, and then you place them in this world, and you present a problem, like say for example, the antagonist has a goal to start a war with this country, the characters will write the story for you as you try and roleplay what would this character do in this situation. In other words, let me put it like this. Let's say you make a main character, a hero or whatnot, who's very patriotic and loves his country and really hates to see his countrymen get hurt. Then you create an antagonist who wants to start a war for his own power and glory. Well, your characters will now start writing your story for you. Your antagonist will use the world around him, and if he's smart, and the culture that you've already created to exploit to start a war. And the protagonist, by his very nature, will start doing everything he can to stop him. There's no forcement here. You don't have to force people to do things. That you just basically write down what they would have already have done. Does that make sense? So I really believe that characters help write your story for you, and it's so true. Every time I write anything with my story or whatnot, I sit down and I think, okay, here's the situation. What would my character realistically do? And that's what I write. And in this sense, my father's always said that if you take people who take like Dungeons and Dragons seriously and really try to roleplay their character, those make fantastic stories. They could actually make really good novels, because that's exactly what that is. It's a whole bunch of characters trying to roleplay as their character, simply doing what they think their character would do in this situation, and it can create really cool stories. So try to write it from that standpoint. Do not do this. Do not go, okay, here's my character. I want him to do B. So how do I get him to do B? Don't do that. Say, here is my character. Here's the situation he is in. What would he do? And then write your story. And not only will you find the story will generally tend to become much better, but you also get rid of a whole bunch of problems of, well, wait, why did the character do that? That doesn't make any sense. He would never do that. That's silly. And one more, I'm almost home, but one more I wanted to give you guys as far as my philosophy of writing. More is better, at least when it comes to action. When it comes to descriptions, I'm kind of the opposite. I hate writing descriptions because they're boring and they take forever, and I kind of prefer for the reader to use their imagination to create certain things. If it needs to be described, if it's important, you know what something looks like, I will, of course, describe it. But I tend to prefer to let people get their own visuals in their head for certain things. But when it comes to action, an actual fight scene, more is better. In the sense that the less people have to use their imagination for a fight, the better. Because, and I'm not saying to visualize the fight, I'm saying, perfect example, if you write, they fought each other with swords, and they moved really fast, and they went back and forth for minutes, and that's it. Well, the reader has to process all this and use their imagination to create that fight. They have to imagine every sword blow and every feint and counter and parry, and it's all their process, and it slows things down because they kind of have to stop and imagine this. If you go into more detail of what actually happened, this man stabbed to the left and he blocked it, or this man kicked but the other one jumped over it and dodged to the left, this man cast this exact spell and that swung to the right, and the other guy cast another spell that countered it to the left, then the person who's reading only has to use their imagination to visualize what you just told them, instead of creating their own fight in their own head. It makes things move along much faster. As weird as it sounds, it really does make it move along much faster. Plus, you have so much more control of the fight. Especially if you're doing like what I'm doing, a shonen anime, where fights are everything. That's the whole thing. It has to be interesting and fun. And by putting more detail and more control into the fights, you can change them subtly. You can also go into what's going on behind the scenes. But, so when it comes to action, I honestly feel, I mean, you have to hit a balance. You don't want to talk about, you don't have to describe everything and anything. But generally speaking, the more detail you give, the easier it is for the reader to visualize it, and thus the easier it will be for the reader to be sucked into the fight. A perfect example of what I'm talking about, or the way I feel fights should be held, is the arena story. In my story, episode 2, that entire episode is pretty much a fight. It's the first one I wrote, and it is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. So you can go there if you see. Now, I know that a lot of people, they don't care. That writing's not their thing. They've seen too many. They don't really care, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. I mean, like I said, Thoughts Behind the Wheel is simply me talking about whatever was on my mind at that time. And since I'm trying to finish writing episode 3, it's pretty much the only thing that's been on my mind all day today. One more piece of advice. When it comes to writing, well, I mean, mini scenes, but especially action scenes. My car, the music in my car is all movie and video game soundtracks. In fact, hang on, let's see what's in my CD player. I don't even know. Hang on, let me see. Hello? Ah, yes. I don't know if you can hear that or not. Anyway, I don't know if you can hear that or not, but basically that's the main theme for Mass Effect 2, because that's the Mass Effect 2 soundtrack. That's what my car is full of, because I use that to help me write mostly action sequences, some emotional and things like that, or to develop the scenes in my mind. Because, let's say, for example, what I do for almost all of my fight scenes that I come up with in my head, I will play hang on, guys, I got to throw something away in the dumpster. So I will play a song that I think is a good, mood-setting song or appropriate for the atmosphere, and then I will kind of map the fight to that song. Like, say, for example, when the song is slower or at a lower beat, maybe the fighters are talking or standing there, it's a break in the action, and then when it raises to a crescendo or whatnot, I'll think of, something they do or something. I mean, I can't give you details, but I think you understand what I'm talking about. And you might have to use several different songs to map out one fight, but you will find that it actually helps. At least for me, it helps, because music is so powerful in setting an atmosphere and completely transforming a scene, that the same power can be used to help write the scene in the first place. And for example, that fight in episode 2 of Arena was mapped in my mind, was created using a whole bunch of different fight music, or music from conflicts and movies and video games and stuff, to create that scene. So you can try it. You never know. It might really help you. It helps me a lot. It also helps sometimes with emotional scenes. You play something very sad, and it helps. I think what it is it helps get you into that atmosphere. It helps you identify with what those characters are feeling. If they're in the middle of a fight and their adrenaline's pounding, and you're listening to a really, emotional fight theme or song, it kind of gets your heart pounding too. It kind of helps you identify with them. If it's a really sad moment and you're listening to really sad music, again, it kind of helps you identify. So it kind of helps me write better. Anyway, all things told, I'm home. So I will see you guys later. Take care. And, bye.